Welcome to this carrier update presented by Powerfleet. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined today by our host, an enterprise trucking expert, Thomas Wasson. Thomas, how are you?
Doing well. I'm wearing so many hats today, I in fact have none on my head, just to show the chaos that is unfolding. But speaking of chaos, it doesn't look like it too much today, but we have the big map, and it is map time for Monday. And so if you look at it nationwide, the fun one is Cape Girardeau, Missouri, also known as Neely's Landing in that neck of the woods here. It looks like when we're talking about spring surges, you know, we talk about CPG, we talk about lawnmowers and other things. Cape Girardeau has a large Procter & Gamble facility off of Neely's, as well as a few other manufacturing hubs in the area. It appears there may be signs of life, or there may be signs of pent-up consumer demand, but it's very interesting to see, especially looking in other parts of the Carolinas, as well as parts of Nebraska. You know, across the board, we're still seeing the situation where we're very low in terms of outbound tender rejections and volumes. So this is a very interesting thing to look at, especially coming from, you know, we're at 29, or a little over 29% outbound tender rejections out of Neely's alone.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up this map and you look across the country, you see a lot of red. I mean, you look just south there in Dallas. I mean, Dallas is one of those largest markets. I mean, what do you think about when you see all this loosening that's happening in those red markets, but then you see this one little pocket of tightness? What do you think? How do you think carriers should react to that pocket of tightness where the rest of the market, I mean, especially a lot of the surrounding markets around that area, really the changes aren't too significant relative to their size?
I think it's a great point. A lot of our data focuses on a contract. And so if we're talking to carriers and say spot, well, the first thing you're going to think is, I need to go hitch up the wagons and get the Neelys, you know. But at the same time, this could reflect the fact that maybe there's a special project going on. Maybe this is a situation where with the spring surge, we have our mowers and everything else coming in. And so, you know, when we're looking at this, I've actually got a few slides later out of Cape Girardeau. You know, the spot rates are still falling across the board. So I don't think it's a glimmer of hope yet, but it is definitely an interesting blip on the radar, and that should provide a situation where we will see some capacity attempting to cover that, but I wouldn't bet the bank on it, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's what you bring up good points there. I mean, it is interesting when you still look at, we're still seeing these large markets. I mean, you've got an Allentown up there in the Northeast, which is relatively large, a Detroit, an Indianapolis, a Columbus. I mean, these are large markets that are loosening pretty quick, but then you get one like a Cape Girardeau that tightens really fast, right? I mean, obviously the market size has some impact on that, right?
Yeah.
More rejections in Cape Girardeau is going to affect that, or that rejection rate can move a little more. But I mean, you look at it on this map with that weighted rejection where we're kind of adjusting the rejections by this, yeah, giving the size of the market. Well, okay, it is a good area, whereas back in the day, we were talking about California, everybody flooding in, and then we saw it in bright red earlier this year.
Oh yeah, California dreaming. Kicking it over here to our next chart here. This is where kind of looking at outbound tender volumes year over year. So we've got in yellow here 2020 to 2021. Currently in blue on the mountaintop here, we are at 12,469, but 1 year prior, we were at 15,000, talking about index points, basis points. Think Dow Jones, for those of you who are wondering what the indexes are. But we're starting to see what appears to be a situation where there is some form of seasonality. Now, we have a little bit of a blip here where it's going up. Volumes have somehow, it's not the dead cat bounce, as some people would say, but we're bouncing to something because we're in a situation where it actually has gone up a little bit. Now, this is something that, you know, contextually, maybe it's a little bit of an Easter blunt, maybe we're moving up, but, you know, year over year, the important thing to realize is we're starting to see what begins of a form of seasonality. We're seeing volumes go down just because of consumer changes. This is interesting to watch. Kicking over to our next chart real fast here. Looking at outbound tender rejections. As we see volumes decline in our last one, rejections are still going down. Well, we're down to 9.92% across the board, and looking at van, 9.67%. We're finally in a situation where we may not be really yelled at for once, unless you are flatbed, which is hanging out around 31.74%, and refrigerated still staying strong. Reefer madness across the board at 15.64%. So got a lot to look at here, especially with these tender rejections. rejections.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point on the tender rejection side. I mean, you look at the van and the reefer side. I mean, there's just these sharp declines, and then you see the flatbed market, right? We've talked about it for a while. That flatbed market's kind of it's been insulated from this softening.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll touch on it in a shipper update here in a little while. Well, housing starts in March were pretty strong, and guess what? A lot of flatbed kind of gives insight to that flatbed activity. I think on the previous chart where you're talking about volumes, you saw that little dip right around Good Friday. Good Friday got erased in that 7-day moving average, right back up to. They're still down a little if you take out the little the blips,
yes.
the big moves. So they are still down a little, but I mean, it's not as bad as it was.
Well,
but
it's like a minor Easter miracle. On the third month, it rose slightly again.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Thomas, for that update. We will take a quick break, and we will be back with more FreightWaves Now.